Gopi Sajasto Tarisatra Sri Srimad Divine Grace Hirabai Charanarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Sri Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Skandi Giti Founder Charyas Divine Grace Sri Prabhupada Ki Namacharya Sri Haridas Thakur Ki Samavata Bhakti Vrinda Ki Harinam Sankirtan Ki Srimad-Bhagavatam ki Jai Gauda Premanande. All that is to be assembled devotees, all that is to be assembled devotees, all that is to be assembled devotees, all that is to Sri Guru and to Sri Gauranga, all that is to Sri Prabhupada. Om Agyana Timirandasya Vyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmiritam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Parakamalam Sri Gurun Vaisnavam Syam Sri Rupam Sagradatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vikam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakandritam Scham Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostite Tapta Kancana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutidevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. Before reciting the Srimad-Bhagavatam, which is our means of conquest, let us first offer our respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayesha Badrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Tamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. By regularly hearing the Srimad-Bhagavatam and by rendering a service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed by practically nil and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs. It becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Samhitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreya Sayalokasya Dhanyam Swasthayanam Maha. This Srimad-Bhagavatam, known as the Grantaraj, the king of all Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God, which is compiled by the incarnation of God, the Srila Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Srinivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna
Krishna Krishna Hare Hare
Krishna Krishna Hare Hare
Hare Rama Hare Rama
Hare Rama Hare Rama
Rama Rama Hare Hare
Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Surabhyaya Namaha.
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 Mukam karoti vatalam pangam langayate girim yatripatamaham bande Sri Karunginataranam yatripatamaham bande Sri Karunginataranam. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our morning Bhagavatam class, continuing from canto number 4, chapter 25, the characteristics of King Puranjana. And today we're doing text 25, I believe. Right? 25. Tam aha lalitam viraha savrida smita shobhanam snigdhena panga punkena spristaha premod brahmad dhruva tam aha lalitam viraha Savridha smita shobhanam Snigdhena panga punkena Vrishta premod pramad dhruva Tam aha lalitam viraha Savridha smita shobhanam Snigdhena panga punkena Vrishta premod pramad dhruva Tam aha lalitam viraha Savridha smita shobhanam Snigdhena panga punkena Vrishta premod pramad dhruva
Tam lalitam vira Savrida smita shobhanam Snigdhena panga punkhena Sprishta premod bhramad dhruva
Tamaha lalitam viraha Savrida smita shobhanam Snigdhena panga punkhena Sprushta prema bhramad dhruva Tamaha lalitam viraha Savrit-smita-shobhanam
Savidasmitashobhanam
Snigdena-panga-punkena
Snigdena Pangapunkena
Spishta-premod-pramadhruva
Vistapremodhamadhruva
Tamaha lalitam vira
Tamaha lalitam viraha
Savridda smita shobhanam
Savridasmitashobhanam
Snigdena pangapunkena
Snigdena Pangapunkena
Prastasha premod brahmadro
Spishta-premod-pramadhruva
Tam
Tam
unto her
unto her
aha
aha
addressed
addressed
Lalitam
Lalitam
very gently
very gently
Viraha
Viraha
the hero
the hero
Savrida
Savrida
with shyness
shyness
Smita
Smita
smiling
smiling
Shobhanam
Shobhanam
very beautiful
very beautiful
Snigdhena
Snigdena
by sex desire
by sex desire
Apangapunkena
Apangapumkena
by the arrow of glancing
by the arrow of glancing
Pristaha
Prishtaha
thus pierced
thus pierced
Prema Ubramat
Prema Ubramat
Prema Udbramat
Prema Ubramat
exciting love
exciting love
Dhruva
Dhruva
by the eyebrow
by the eyebrows
translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Sri Prabhupada Ki.
yeah
Puranjana, the hero, became attracted by the eyebrows and smiling face of the very beautiful girl and was immediately pierced by the arrows of her lusty desires. When she smiled shyly, she looked very beautiful to Puranjana, who, although a hero, could not refrain from addressing her. Kindly repeat after me. Puranjana,
Puranjana
the hero,
the hero
became attracted
became attracted
by the eyebrows
by the eyebrows
and smiling face
and smiling face
of the very beautiful girl
of the very beautiful girl
and was immediately pierced
and was immediately pierced
by the arrows
by the arrows
of her lusty desires.
of her lusty desires.
When she smiled shyly,
When she smiled shyly,
she looked very beautiful
she looked very beautiful
to Puranjana,
to Puranjana,
who, although a hero,
who although a hero
could not refrain
could not refrain
from addressing her.
from addressing her.
Purport. Every living entity is a hero in two ways. When he is a victim of the illusory energy, he works as a great hero in the material world, as a great leader, politician, businessman, industrialist, etc. And his heroic activities contribute to the material advancement of civilization. One can also become a hero by being a master of the senses, ego swami, ego dasa or ego swami, two kinds of heroes. One can also become a hero, yes, material activities are false heroic activities, whereas restraining the senses from material engagement is great heroism. However great a hero one may be in the material world, he can be immediately conquered by the lumps of flesh and blood known as the breasts of women, In the history of material activities, there are many examples, like the Roman hero Antony, who became captivated by the beauty of Cleopatra. Similarly, a great hero in India named Bajirao became a victim of a woman during the time of Maharashtrian politics, and he was defeated. from history, we understand that formerly politicians used to employ beautiful girls who were trained as Vishakanya. Vishakanya. These girls had poison injected into their bodies from the beginning of their lives so that in due course of time they would become so immune to the poison and so poisonous themselves that simply by kissing a person they could kill him. Those poisonous girls were engaged to see an enemy and kill him with a kiss, a deadly kiss. Thus, there are many instances in human history of heroes who have been curbed simply by women. Being part and parcel of Krishna, the living entity is certainly a great hero, but due to his own weakness, he becomes attracted in the material to the material features. Krishna bahir mukkahana bhoga bansha kare nikata stamaya tare japatya dhare. It is said in the Prema Vivarta that when a living entity wants to enjoy material nature, he is immediately victimized by the material energy. A living entity is not forced to come into the material world. He makes his own choice, being attracted by beautiful women. Every living entity has the freedom to be attracted by material nature or to stand as a hero and resist that attraction. It is simply a question of the living entities being attracted or not being attracted. There is no question of his being forced to come into contact with material energy. One who can keep himself steady and resist the attraction of material nature is certainly a hero and deserves to be called a Goswami. Unless one is master of the senses, he cannot become a Goswami. The living entity can take one of two positions in this world. He may become a servant of the senses, or he may become a master of them. By becoming a servant of the senses, one becomes a great material hero. And by becoming a master of the senses, he can become a Goswami or spiritual hero. There we go. The choice is ours. What kind of hero we want to be. Prabhupada quotes a few examples. When I was in Indonesia some years back, we came to know that actually the whole country, up until maybe 500 years back, was they were actually Vaishnava for many centuries. And then one such Hindu king married one Muslim princess, and the history changed. So similar examples that are here. Due to our, due to allowing ourselves to be attracted by the many beautiful features of the material energy. And of course here, as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructs, important instruction for someone who is actually Vaishnava. Satsanga Tyaga e Vaishnava sa Sri Sangi Eko Sadhu Krishna Abhakta Ar. Three categories that one needs to keep distant from. Sri Sangi, the attraction to the opposite sex. Inasmuch as a man may be attracted to a woman, women are also attracted to men. It works both ways. So Sri Sangi Eka Sadhu, Asadhu, those who are not devotees, we should avoid closely associating with them. And Krishna Abhakta, there are many people who are bhaktas of this one or that one, different devotees of different demigods, for example. So one is also cautioned not to associate with them. So in the purport, Prabhupada explains how we are not forced to come in this material world. We are also not forced to. It is a question of choice. That choice is given to all living entities, either to be the servant of our senses, the servant of our mind, or to be the master of our senses, to be the master of our mind. If one cultivates the knowledge that is given, especially in books like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad-Bhagavatam, and keeps good association, then it is possible to learn the art of controlling the mind, controlling the senses. It is naturally the biggest challenge that everyone has. That challenge is also there for devotees, because the question that always comes up, Maharaj, how to control my mind? So the mind by nature is very restless, but that's a whole discussion that is, of course, in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna, I think the last portion of the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Mind can only be ultimately controlled by spiritual intelligence, not even by material intelligence. By spiritual intelligence, one can control the mind. So it means that actually, unless we are exposed, unless we are introduced or connected with the spiritual energy, which is in many places nicely explained in the Bhagavad Gita, one has to succumb, has to be attracted to the inferior energy, material energy. So therefore the importance for devotees to be with devotees, to associate with devotees, to be engaged in so many different activities that will keep one focused. Otherwise, it also explains how even if one of our senses is not controlled, we can be, we can be distracted and lose our focus, which is meant to be developing in terms of self-realization. So that is message being conveyed here in this verse. Same theme that we've been discussing actually, the theme of attraction. No one can live without being attracted to something or to someone. Yeah. So that was text 25. Text 26. Katvam kanja palakshakshi kasyasiha kuta sati imam upa purim bhiru kim chikir shasi sham same. Yes. The translation to text 26. So this is Puranjana addressing this beautiful woman. My dear lotus-eyed, kindly explain to me where you are coming from, who you are, and whose daughter you are. You appear very chaste. What is the purpose of your coming here? What are you trying to do? Please explain all these things to me. Purport. The first aphorism of the Vedanta Sutra is Tato Brahma Jigyasa. In the human form of life, one should put many questions to himself and to his intelligence. In the various forms of life lower than human life, the intelligence does not go beyond the range of life's primary necessities, namely eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Dogs, cats, and tigers are always busy trying to find something to eat or a place to sleep, trying to defend or have a sexual intercourse successfully. In the human form of life, however, one should be intelligent enough to ask what he is, why he has come into the world, what his duty is, who is the supreme controller, what is the difference between dull matter and the living entity, etc. There are so many questions, and the person who is actually intelligent should simply inquire about the supreme source of everything, Tato Brahma Jigyasa. A living entity is always connected with a certain amount of intelligence, but in the human form of life, the living entity must inquire about his spiritual identity. This is real human intelligence. It is said that one who is simply conscious of the body is no better than an animal, even though he is in the human form. Shastra refers to such a person as Dvipada Pashu, two-legged animal. Animals normally have four legs, but those who are in the human form, having the same conscious as four-legged animals, are referred to as Dvipada Pashu, two-legged animals. In the Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Sri Krishna says, Sarvasya chaham Ridi Sani Visto Matasmitir Gyanam Pohanam Cha. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. In the animal form of living, in the animal form, the living entity is completely forgetful of his relationship with God. This is called apohanam, or forgetfulness. In the human form of life, however, consciousness is more uh, greatly developed, and consequently, the human being has a chance to understand his relationship with God. In the human form, one should utilize his intelligence by asking all these questions, just as Paranjana, the living entity, is asking the unknown girl where she has come from, what her business is, why she is present, etc. Uh, these are inquiries about Atma Tattva, self-realization. The conclusion is that unless a living entity is inquisitive about self-realization, he is nothing but an animal. Mm, yeah. So this is also, this very important point regarding inquisitiveness, very fundamental point which is uh, brought out in many places. We all know in the Bhagavad Gita, if one wants to know about uh, tattva, what is the truth? How does that verse begin? Tadvidi, yeah. Tadvidi pranipatina kari prashnena, prashna, question. Sevaya, upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva darshinaha. So that is that is the primary reason or purpose why we have this human form of life. We should be inquisitive about such matters that are described here. And for example, one who is a member of the Krishna consciousness movement should be inquisitive. Well, what is the Krishna consciousness movement all about? What is the purpose? Wow, we'll get a nice darshan this one. Our acharyas explained actually how the uh, the real success of a student or of a disciple is to be questioning or to be inquisitive as to what are the desires or what are the intentions of the acharyas or the spiritual master. If we're not, if we don't practice in this way to be inquisitive as to what ultimately is pleasing Guru and Krishna, then we will be lacking in this important component, which is meant to actually help us progress or advance in spiritual life. So we should be practiced in that way. And this verse, of course, from Bhagavad Gita explains that in addition to being, to being inquisitive, one must engage in seva. There's a nice anecdote given in that respect. I heard many years back. This was during the time of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who had, as we know, many disciples, and there was one couple. The lady, the wife was initiated, but the husband was not. Sometimes the husband is initiated and the wife is not. So in this case, it was the wife. And actually, there are two stories. Anyways, the one I want to bring out is this one person. He was still relatively new to Krishna consciousness, and he came to see to the mutt where Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was staying, and he began to ask questions, like very confidential questions about the pastimes of Radha and Krishna and Vrindavan, things which are generally not discussed so openly, especially with new persons. And in reply to his question, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had told him that actually best if you can come back. And there's one devotee who's been living here in the mutt for many years, and he's serving in the kitchen. You kindly help him in his service. So he did that, which was a good thing. He followed the good instruction given to him. And very meticulous, very nicely doing his seva, and by associating with that particular devotee, he came to understand that right time it was not proper for him to ask such very confidential kind of questions. So in other words, this is brought out actually in many places in different purports given by Srila Prabhupada. Unless one engages in practical devotional service, simply asking questions will not be effective. So these three things are connected with one another. To be inquisitive, even before being inquisitive, there's a prerequisite. What is that prerequisite? It's in the verse actually. Pranipat. One must have a particular mentality of submissiveness. One must also, often explained by Srila Prabhupada, one should not be challenging in his inquiry. One must have that mood of actually sincerely wanting to learn or to understand. One must recognize his subordinate position. We are so many things we are not able to know or to understand, and because to approach someone, it means that we are accepting, realizing, understanding to some extent our inferior position. Due to false ego, we are generally having difficulty in understanding our subordinate position. So this, so these three aspects are, when they are in place, the the aspect of humility, understanding that we are not able by ourselves to understand everything. Humility, service, then
Inquire.
and then we become, yeah, by these two aspects of humility and service, then we become more qualified to actually ask questions or be inquisitive. So that is pointed out here. Any thoughts on this? Of course, speaking about inquisitiveness.
The question is on you said that one can control the mind by spiritual intelligence.
Yes.
So how one will be able to gain that spiritual intelligence? How one will be able
By
to?
reading spiritual books.
But we read, but still we will not have that.
Well, we are not properly reading, we're not properly hearing. We are, by associating with what is spiritual, especially in the matter of hearing, we will develop a spiritual intelligence. Yeah. Where's the Bible? We have Bhagavad Gita here?
Yes.
Where? Back there.
No, I'm asking.
Huh? Oh, that over here. Yeah. Yes. I think it's the last verse. Second or the third? Two. Yeah. In the third chapter, the fourth. The very last verse, the last few verses of the fourth canto, the third chapter, this whole discussion is there regarding the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. And these are the last three verses. The last one is the one I was referring to, text 41 to 43. Yeah. So Krishna explains, actually even from text 40, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. The material senses, material mind, and material intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the real entity and bewilders him. That's text 40. Then 41. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses, and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Yes, in other words, uncontrolled senses, uncontrolled mind destroys real knowledge and self-realization. And then Indriyani paranyahur, Indriyebhya param manaha, that verse. The working senses are superior to dull matter. The mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind, and he, the soul, even higher than the intelligence. So this is the verse, the last one, which speaks about spiritual intelligence. Evam buddhe param buddha samstabhyat manam atmana jahi shatrum mahabaho karupam durasadam. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust, which means that we can only overcome the material attraction in terms of the senses, material mind, and material intelligence by what is called deliberate spiritual intelligence. And yeah, we can hear the purport, short purport to this verse. This third chapter, this is the last verse of this chapter, is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead without considering impersonal voidness the ultimate end. In the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overlording and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses in the mind. by steady intelligence directed toward one's pure identity. This is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, the philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses by the so-called practice of yogic postures can never help a man towards spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. The same thing is mentioned actually in the very beginning of the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is dealing with the modes of material nature, where Krishna explains to Arjuna, Param bhuya praraksyami jnanam jnanam uttamam yadhyadva munaya sarve param siddhim ito gataha. Very important verse, the first and second, which translates as follows: the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Again I shall declare to you this supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, jnanam uttamam, knowing which all the sages have attained the supreme perfection." And the next verse is explaining, idam jnanam upasritya mama sadharnyam agataha. This is the process. By becoming fixed in this knowledge, in this superior knowledge, in this transcendental knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature like my own. So until we come to that, unless we cultivate that higher knowledge, that transcendental knowledge, we will remain under the influence of material consciousness, material mind, material senses, isn't it? So it's a question, Prabhupada gives that example that I'm sure we've all heard many times, of the rod and the fire. The rod is iron. The iron rod, when they argue, is iron, but because of its constant association with the fire, it takes on the qualities of the fire, and that hot iron rod, when every day we have the opportunity to do that, to intensify our activities, our association, our thoughts. It's all in connection with the three activities of the mind: thinking, feeling, and willing. The more we endeavor in that way, then the spiritual we become, as Prabhupada explains, Krishnized, isn't it? Spiritualized, and therefore we are able to no longer be attracted by the otherwise attractive features of the material world. Yeah. So that is what people who become devotees, that is what characterizes them. They are making that effort. They have made that choice of applying the process, and the more we apply the process, the more we will get the results. Okay. Jai Grantara Srimad-Bhagavatam.
Bhakti Raghav Swami Maharaj ki
Jai.